Call the meeting of the Sweetwater County School District Number 1 Board of Trustees to order. If you would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. West, if you would proceed with the roll call, please.
Certainly. Mr. Batolo?
Here.
Mr. Reedy?
Here.
Mrs. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Hay? Mr. Jackman?
Here.
Mr. Mickelson?
Present.
Chairman Jellicoe?
Here. Item 2B, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Jackman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Reedy. Mr. Batolo. Is that Mr. Batolo?
Mr. Reedy.
Mr. Reedy, okay. Second was by
Reedy.
Mr. Reedy. All in favor, please say aye.
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 They're going in slow tonight. Aye. Motion passes. Okay, we also have an addendum, so I would entertain a motion to approve the addendum.
So moved, Madam Chair.
It's been moved by Mr. Mickelson,
Second.
second by Mrs. Thompson. All in favor, please say aye.
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 There's 3.
Aye.
Aye. 5. Motion passes. Item number 3, superintendent reports, personnel update, and state teacher evaluation system by Mrs. Bolton.
Good evening, Chair Jellicoe, Superintendent McGovern, and members of the board. I'm here tonight to give an update on some exit surveys that were given to staff that had resigned or retired. I'll give you a brief update on staffing, and then I am going to explain a little bit the current teacher evaluation system that the state had just finished and where the district is at and steps we're looking at taking for at least next year. So of course, when we send out the exit surveys, our goal is to understand why individuals are leaving and look for a way to improve. We had 36 resignations or retirements this year. And when I sent the exit survey out, I had 17 responses. 8 of the resignations were secondary, 9 were elementary. 13 of the 17 responses had 10 years or less with our district, and 3 of the 17 had above 15 years experience with the district. We asked this question. It was interesting. About 50% decided when they were going to resign or retire within the last 3 months before school ended. When we asked what prompted them to resign, you can see the different reasons. I did write out dissatisfaction, benefits, or other, just because it's on the latter part of the slide. That way you guys knew what those stood for. I do have the reasonings for the dissatisfaction, of which I won't go into publicly. Most were leaving for personal reasons, going back to school, a job advancement, again, moving back closer to family. When asked if there was a specific incident that prompted the resignation, we had 11 said no, 5 said yes. Of the 5 that said yes, one, a husband was transferring, another one couldn't get the job that he was looking for here. And then the other reasons I can share, but not publicly. Simply asked if there was an issue that prompted, did they discuss the issue with their supervisor? We asked about the quality of training received in Sweetwater 1, and honestly, the comments were extremely positive. The 3s, the comments geared more towards and it was kind of a suggestion as we move forward to try to differentiate the PD a little bit more, or training, so that they feel like what they're going to is applicable. Sometimes they felt like some of the trainings they were going to didn't necessarily pertain to their position. It was pretty much overall a pretty good working relationship with the supervisor. I've got, like I said, I've got stuff I can share, but not publicly, for areas of improvement. Very positive for working relationships with staff members. The only comment I got on there is just as PLCs are proceeding and things like that, just continuing to work on that trust. You know, once teams, it wasn't a negative thing, but as teams turn over, it takes time to build that. It just doesn't happen overnight. Very positive remarks about our salaries. The benefit package also had high remarks. One of them felt like the amount paid for what we get doesn't really match up. We did ask, how would you rank your overall workload for this position and the time you have to accomplish it? 1 being not enough time, and 5 being enough time. A lot of the comments geared around, we understand in teaching, it just is the nature of the job. You're going to be working beyond the data plan. Finding ways, though, to get more done during the day and have family time and not always having to work. A lot, we're so thankful about the PLC and thankful for planning. They said from other states, they said people don't realize how lucky we are that we even have that. I wouldn't know. I've only been in Wyoming, but they said that they were really happy. They said if we could separate the PLC and planning time a little bit, although yes, they're one, that would be helpful. Some of the ones had to do with some of the positions that have a lot of extracurriculars kind of outside and being, they do get compensated for that, but it just becomes a little bit much. And I can't say it without identifying the person, but I can tell you guys later. Yeah. How would you rank the support you received in this position? For the most part, pretty positive. I didn't see any comments that stood out. There were some within special education and particularly dealing with students that have behavior, and the support within the building wasn't necessarily negative, but just some suggestions on how we could potentially improve that. Especially the K-4 schools that have some of our higher needs students, sometimes they just didn't feel like there was always enough adults. The overall satisfaction with the position, overall pretty good. The 2s were more, they really didn't feel like that was the job that maybe they signed up for. Did you encounter any problems in your current position that you were not able to get assistance or work through? We had 17 responses, but only 15 responded to this. And of the 5 that said yes, honestly, there was actually just a couple comments on there about having that balance of when there's complaints that come in, not always feeling like maybe that the school's catering one way more than to supporting the teacher. And so it's kind of finding that balancing act. It was helpful comments, of which, like I said, I can give you guys more detail later. Based on your experience here, would you recommend Sweetwater 1 as your potential employer or a potential employer? Only one said no. And in their comment, they said it would be dependent on what building they were applying for. Would you reapply for Sweetwater School District number 1? I did mark those of the no's, 2 retired, and they said, I'm old and I'm tired and I'm done. So 1 had gotten a degree in a different area and was actually moving away from teaching. And that's unfortunate because she was a dynamite teacher. And the other one said, no, because I want to be in a small community. Some of the maybes were, can you change the climate and I might come back? Can you move my family closer? Some of those things, overall not negative. This was the last question, but I did want, before I jump into the evaluation piece, we're looking a little bit better at this time of year than we were last year. Last year we had 49 open positions. Actually, our certified vacancy notice will be updated again when I have Ellen. She was out today, but we actually went through and met with every single school and every single department. And we knew the gen ed numbers because we had done that, but we went through all of our special education numbers. As you guys know, unless it's previously written into a grant funded position, special ed comes out of the general education budget first, and then it's reimbursed and we're capped. And so I believe last year we were at about $750,000 that the general fund had to pay that the state didn't reimburse us. Well, our numbers have shifted, or students have moved out, or they just aren't qualified anymore. And based off of that, we actually were able to absorb quite a few positions. Nobody got hurt. They were positions that were open, that the need wasn't there. If the average caseload, when we divided the amount of teachers, like one school had 4 resource teachers and I think at one point they each had about 15 to 17 kids. We divided their caseload going into next year and they had a caseload of 4 kids each. And so
Can't justify the positions.
Right. So even with 2 teachers, they have a caseload of 8. Sorry. And so what we were able to do was move some staff into open positions. Those conversations occurred today and were actually very positive. So I actually show that we have 18 positions open right now. And the good news is we have interviews scheduled next week for a resource, the transition coordinator, and the drama position. So that's exciting. So we're making progress. So we'll make sure that those get closed tomorrow so that this reflects the most current update. Go ahead.
Before we go any further, how many resignations did we have total?
36.
Okay, is there any way, it seems like we don't ever get a really high number of people that are willing to do the exit survey.
Mm-hmm.
Any suggestions on how we might be able to up that number?
I actually called quite a few of the resignations that didn't fill it out, and they were just like, I didn't fill it out. They didn't have anything, and that's why I will follow up. They gave their email and their phone number so I could follow up if I had questions. But I also had a list of the ones that had resigned, like 2 of our top teachers. Holy cow, they're so good. They were moving to get closer to family. And I'm like, well, how come neither one of you filled it out? And they're like, we were just busy. We didn't have much to say. Can just keep trying. I can also shoot it out to them again and see if we can get more information. Now that things have slowed down, maybe they'll take some time. I never closed it, so they could have taken it at any point.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Mr. Jackman.
What was our turnover rate like compared to the previous years? It seems like it was better.
It was better. It was a lot better. I would have to get that percentage for you.
I don't need the just the total
Oh.
positions, but if it was better, that's good.
Yeah, it was better. It's hard because the first couple of years we absorbed a lot of positions, and then just with the cutting and stuff. And then last year we saw a decrease in our turnover, and this year we saw a lot less. But I can email you guys those numbers
Thank you.
just so I don't give you inaccurate numbers. I have them written down.
Any questions from the trustees to this point?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Thompson.
I have a question. Nicole, do you think that the retention incentive, is that possibly helping keep some of those teachers, and that's why we're seeing some of the decreases in them leaving?
It could be. When we talk to the staff, they're very, very appreciative of the retention incentive. And one of the things that they're most appreciative of is that it's differentiated among the years of service. So the longer you've been here, the more that you get, and they've really appreciated that.
I think that's something that we talked about last year when we had the two different ones and focusing on if we had the money for a retention incentive, making sure that it did differentiate and acknowledge the people for their years of service. So,
Yeah. And Steph, the other thing that I think helped was when the steps, we weren't just frozen, that they actually got a step. And then this year, I think with the earlier announcement that we were unfreezing 2 of the steps plus they got a step, I think that was huge. The 2 teachers that I was praying wouldn't leave once that happened, they said that there was nothing we were going to do. They want to start a family. And well, that was a lot of the teachers. When they were leaving, they had a reason to leave. There was a couple that weren't happy, and but for the most part, they were warmer climate. We are never going to beat people moving closer to their families when they're starting families. And I don't blame them.
Yeah.
If we can find something to entice them to stay, I want to, but
you can't compete with that one.
no, and nor do I really kind of want to. I mean, yeah. So,
Okay, please proceed.
okay. So, we were supposed to be looking at teacher evaluation systems this year. I did have an evaluation committee together. We were waiting on the chapter 29 rules to be adopted, and the final ones were adopted in the end of January 2020. The reason why those were so important was we were waiting to see if the teachers were going to actually have broke out standards like they did for the leaders. And that did not happen. So with that, there were some other directives for the districts, but we really needed that guidance and some of the changes that were coming before we could start. So at the end of January, those were adopted. And then the Wyoming committee that was working on the Wyoming sample evaluation system was still working through their stuff. So I was kind of holding off because they were piloting and making some more changes with some feedback. And by the time we were more solidified by the end of February, you guys know what happened. And I lost the consultants that were going to come in. We were looking at some research-based evaluation systems, obviously, to look at along with the Wyoming one. And so it just had a domino effect. And actually, they finalized the Wyoming one just recently. So based off of some of the pilots and the feedback. So that came late too. Well, with that, we have to submit in not next year, but the year after, what official evaluation system we'll go with. But this year, we still have to submit an evaluation system justifying all of these pieces that they have outlined in the Chapter 29 rules, of which, I mean, our evaluation system was great when it was developed. I actually think it was one of the models for the state, but it's just outdated. It's been here
It's been years.
It's been a long time. I think it's been here most of the time I've been here. So it's a good 15, 16 years that it's been in place. Well, with that, some times have changed, and there's just, some things that needed to change with that. I'm just going to talk about the state evaluation system because I'll explain what's happening with everything. But the state evaluation system, actually, they took the 7 leader standards because standards have to be developed. So they took the 7 leader standards that were developed and approved, and they took the standards are aligning with the same values and expectations of teachers, except in a different capacity where it aligns with their teaching. So instead of 7 standards, they condensed it down to 4 standards that kind of encompass the best practices. And we did have REL, REL research group that was leading all of this. And so standard 1 would encompass the instruction and assessment. Standard 2 would encompass the learning environment. Standard 3 would encompass the communication and engagement. And standard 4 is the ethics and professionalism. Now, mind you, when they first started, they had more standards and more benchmarks. Then it narrowed down a lot by the end after feedback from superintendents and teachers and whatnot.
Well, and this is much more simplified. If my recollection is there were 13 in the old system that was just really difficult to manage.
Very. Oops. Oh yeah. So I'm going to do a brief walkthrough of the system just to show you guys how simplified it is. It's much more administrator and teacher friendly. Oh gosh. This is just the entry page, and basically the state of Wyoming has me fill out a report at the end of every single year where I have to identify if teachers are highly effective, needs improvement, or ineffective. And we had to figure out, based off of our 13 rubrics, where those fell on what the state is expecting and try to cross those over. And it was not easy. Most teachers fall effective or highly effective. So the whole premise behind this was to really try to get away from evaluative language and really hit language that was more growth-based to help really make this more of a growth-based conversation, because that is what evaluations are supposed to be. And so the benchmarks in here fall under beginning level. So if you're a brand new teacher, you don't feel awful being told you're basic, whereas maybe you're just beginning. This is where you're at. Developing. Then there's the applying level. And then the 4th level, which I'll get into, is the innovating level, which over time with experience. So there's tabs, and the evaluation starts off, and I'll read these just because it's so small. Let me see if I could do that. It's a little bit better. The very first thing it starts off with, and this is not a standard, but it just talks about the professional responsibilities. Anybody that has renewed their teaching license in the last 4 years gets this nice folder from the PTSB that just outlines proper behaviors of teachers. And so this really, you'll see that it references that. But these are just things that are expected of teachers, that it's a yes or a no. There's really no, it's just black or white. Either they do it or they don't. So does the teacher maintain records as required? Yes or no? And then we would mark it. Does the teacher abide by applicable law, policy, and procedures? Either they do or they don't. The teacher is punctual and reliable with duties and paperwork with district attendance policy. Teacher has reviewed and complies with the PTSB regulations and code of conduct. That's that nice folder that we all get when we renew our teaching license. Does the teacher maintain confidentiality? And does the teacher demonstrate honesty and integrity? And those are yes and no's. And then we jump to standard 1. And standard 1 is around the instruction and assessment. So go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I thought you had a
Johnny, I'm
question.
sorry.
You're fine. You'll see that it has the different levels. And a teacher can get marks in all levels. So they don't, I think there's some of the evaluation systems that they have to get like all the marks here in order to go here. They have to get all the marks here. And this system is not set up so. Maybe they have some characteristics where they are applying, but maybe they have some where they're developing. And so you can see you have the option to hit different marks. And then there's always the option of that there's no evidence of practice related in this benchmark, which that's really not good,
No.
right? So I'm just going to go through this one, and you'll see there's no language that is the same in one area and the next. Like our current evaluation system, there's some in basic and proficient that the language is the exact same. And it's been hard with the teachers and the principals as time has gone on and expectations have changed. It's just becoming kind of difficult with. She is in love with it. And the teacher, we did it with distinguished, because sometimes those are the hardest teachers for our principals to give feedback with. And she was not able to hit innovative in everything there. And he said that it was actually kind of a stretch for him and made him even reflect like, oh my gosh, this is something I can work on. And it really helped guide their conversations. Standard 2, the learning environment, maybe we say teacher creates a culture of learning using structures, procedures, and expectations. And then there's different examples of evidence. Teacher, maybe students regulate their time on task. So maybe this teacher has gotten to the point that truly they're not having to really do all the reminders. They've set routines and stuff in their classroom so much that when you walk in, students are the ones, they've got good classroom management. They have their schedule set. So maybe the students are regulating their time on task. And so you'll see that you can do. And you'll see that there's not a ton of benchmarks under these, right? So they're condensed. So it's not so time consuming, and it's those core practices that would be expected. So for communication and engagement, I'm going to mark them innovative. And then for standard 4, ethics and professionalism, on our current evaluation system, right? And so we'll just mark teacher collaborates with community organizations when applicable. And so we'll mark the teacher. This is as high as it goes on this one, so we'll take it. So the nice thing is this is online. And so an administrator actually can be marking this and giving comments throughout the year. And a teacher also can, so that they can be going, obviously left some of them blank, which you can't. So that is showing that it is not met. But like standard 1, it goes out of the total. And Redmond was such an integral part to building. A huge asset to this committee. And I can't begin to explain. But what it does is in these standards is it highlights those conversations for the teacher and the principal so that they can have a positive goal setting stance can occur next to get them to that next level. Or maybe they're missing one check out of a box, and it's able to hone in the conversation and have it direct. And like I said, it's online. Principal and the teacher, they can be leaving comments, and the teacher can be uploading evidence. And as they do walkthroughs or whatnot, they can do that as well. So you've got beginning, developing, applying, and innovative. This is just one way you can look at the chart. And you can see that I believe this was standard 1. Yeah, the blue where I kind of marked more in beginning. It actually, because of marks, put them more in that developing area, but it's just that visual. And then the rest are falling in that applying. And obviously standard 2 was much more at the innovating level. And then it breaks it down by the standard. And then it also does it by bar graph so that they can kind of see if they're in the developing, applying, or innovative level. And so you can see standard 1, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that that's where that teacher's performing, and that conversation will be geared on what next steps to get them to that next level. And then there are some walkthrough tools that they are uploading for principals to be able to use. We still have to have conversations about that, but those can all be uploaded right into this with the standards if they're focusing on something, and those comments can be had. Right now, our current evaluation system, I got online and I tried to fill out the application to submit our current evaluation system, and it's just,
So outdated.
it's not meeting it. It is. So what we were looking at, and I had talked to Chair Jellicoe in our monthly meeting with the superintendent. I talked to the past SEA president, Mr. Cholak, and the current SEA president, Ms. Notman. And I had told them about the timeline, what had happened, and where we're at. And I asked them, you know, how would it be perceived if we took the Wyoming model, because it's a sample, and we could be one of the ones that pilot it next year, so that we actually have an evaluation system that lines up with what the state's asking us to do. And that way we can give feedback to the state and kind of get a feel for this, because as we will still have an evaluation committee, I will bring them in. I will be able to bring in different representatives for, there's like Danielson, McCrail. Yeah, there's numerous ones that we can look at. But I told him, I said, for me to try and just pick one of those other systems and pay tens of thousands of dollars for them when I don't even know that that's what the district would want, that's a waste of money, and it's foolish, because I don't know that if I paid for that, that's what we did, that the district would even go with it. And this isn't going to cost us any money. It's something that we can pilot and we can give feedback on, and the state will actually be coming in and giving training to our principals. They'll do a train the trainers model so that we can train everybody. It's a much more simplified and narrowed in and specific component. Right now, the feedback that we're getting is just where we're at with our current evaluation system is that most of the work is on the administrator, and the administrator is not going to be in the classroom every single day, and that's not always fair to the teacher. And so this puts the work on the teacher also, having to say, this is how I do this. This is how I meet this. And so they could even score themselves to have that conversation with the administrator. And our administrators are so bogged down with the current evaluation system. Honestly, it's killing them. It is killing them, the amount of steps and just the some of the deadlines. And what we're hearing is that everyone, teachers and administrators, feel like they're just going through the steps, and it's not helping anyone grow at this point. And so this doesn't have a professional development plan because it's built into it, and their goals that will replace the professional development plan will be based directly off of this evaluation system. And it helps all ends of the spectrum. Like I said, I think our principals sometimes have the hardest time giving feedback to a lot of our distinguished teachers. And this really sets it up to have those conversations to even help them grow. But most importantly, it helps reflect. And that's what you want, is reflection on practices to be able to have that growth. Towards the end, it does, I don't know why it's not on here. At one point, there will be an overall highly effective. We have to have those in there because that's what the state requires, no matter what evaluation system we use. So I would like to propose potentially, or having I want the board's approval before I send any of this out to the teachers as something for us to pilot for next year. That way the teachers can get a feel for it. And then the other evaluation systems that we bring in when we're looking, they're well used. So there's a lot of information that they'll be able to give us. But I guess adopt this evaluation system for next year, and we'll run the evaluation committee, obviously, for the fair process. There, with the Chapter 29 rules approved, the district would need to sit down and come up with a whole new set of standard. We just don't have time to do that at this. We didn't even at the end of January.
Well, and with Brian as
Uh-huh.
involved, there has been obviously district input
Oh, yes.
into this one. So,
And he's talked to a lot of teachers and administrators. Actually, our district had a lot of heavy input into this. He was invaluable. I cannot thank Brian enough. He is an amazing teacher anyways, an asset to our district, but what he brought to this and the changes that were made based off of his feedback and what he was seeing, and he took it to multiple teachers. It had a huge impact. So thank you, Brian. I'm so thankful for him.
any questions, trustees?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jackman?
I'm curious how this will work for teachers that were deciding on continuing contract or not in that under 3-year, hitting the 3-year mark. Rather than being a raw score, like you're not doing well, you're just beginning. Does that make sense?
Right. So if we have teachers that are working on that 10-year status, they'll still have their evaluations from the previous 2 years. And those, although not the easiest thing, you can relate our rubrics to these 4 standards. It's just they've narrowed this down to the best practices. And honestly, for newer teachers, I think that this will be extremely beneficial, because what I hear from our newer teachers is they're so overwhelmed by the 13 rubrics and the amount of information in them that I sometimes think right now, just where we're at in education, it's not helping them. And so I think that this will actually help focus it. And by the cycle, our administrators will have to meet with the teachers at the beginning of the year to set goals on this. And they'll kind of get a feel based off of last year's evaluation, obviously, because they wouldn't have this one filled out. And then it's that ongoing process. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions or comments from the trustees? One of the things that you look for is reliability when in any evaluation system. And by that, I mean that an administrator in this building and an administrator in this building, their results, if they were to switch places, you would get within a reasonable distance the same results. So you said that there was going to be some training by the state for administrators and staff. Okay, so do you have an idea what that might look like? And then is there going to be some way of doing those cross checks kind of thing to determine whether in fact it is reliable and that it's being applied equally in the different buildings?
Yes. So after the initial training, then there'll be ongoing conversations with our admin team where obviously like we'll either show a video or we'll have a sample of something.
Some kind of a scenario.
Right. And we work on that inner rater reliability. We had that with our current system, but the issue is there's just so much subjectivity where what we're expecting versus how that one was built that it has made it hard, but we still had that training. We will continue to have that training with this. That's essential with any, because there's always going to be some subjectivity, right, to any evaluation system. So we'll have that continued inner rater reliability.
And secondly, since this is a pilot, there may be tweaks. I mean, we may have further input to the state as far as maybe some things that we come across, and maybe there may be some tweaks or something like that to the point that this could become our own.
It can. And the nice thing is they had the REL researchers. And so piloting for the state, yes. And the state will be giving us opportunities for feedback. They bring the researchers in and have oh gosh, I can't remember what it's called, where they talk to the groups and ask the questions about it. And based off of that feedback, it absolutely could change parts of the evaluation system. Yes.
Thank you. Further questions or comments, trustees? Hearing none. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, item number 4 for board information is a discussion on the district reentry Smart Start Task Force. Mrs. McGovern?
Sure.
Turn that over to you.
Sure. As mentioned in the last Board of Education meeting, the district is interested in putting together a reentry task force to make plans for the fall. And prior to doing so, I wanted to make sure that we open that up to see if there were any suggestions or input from our trustees. And then after our meeting today, then tomorrow I would begin to solidify that vision for the task force. We know that the purpose for it would be to establish some plans for the start of school. We know that those plans have to be very versatile, knowing that they could change at any time and that we would be able to mobilize as we needed to and very quickly. Ideally, some starter points for the task force would be to have 25 people at most on there. The real reason for that is one, of course, group size. We want it to be small enough that it's workable with people, but also we're following the governor's guidelines for the size of groups that are inside, of course. We would like to have some students on the task force, trustees, parents, business partners, some administrators, teachers, of course, in different levels. So we could understand what a primary concern would be versus middle, elementary, junior high, and then high school. So really a plethora of people that have different viewpoints. You make better decisions that way. And then pursue there. We would also have some of our district directors. We know from an operational standpoint, we've got to be able to get kids to school, so transportation is going to be key. Nutrition services, what do cafeterias look like? And in following all the different recommendations that we're getting from a national level, from a state level, from a local level as well, keeping those into place. So really a good group with different mindsets that we could put those in and make some good recommendations as we bring that forward later on through the summer. One thing that we need to keep in mind, though, is that any of the recommendations that we currently have could change. And that's why our reentry plans have to be very versatile. They could be phased in approaches as well. It all kind of depends on what that health data says and what the recommendations are for schools at that time. But really, I'm interested in any recommendations or input from the trustees. If there's things that they would like to see or ideas to make it better, really input that could help us in moving forward.
So trustees, any suggestions? Crickets. I am going to ask 2 board members that will actually participate on the task force rather than observe. So I would be looking for 2 volunteers for that. But clearly, what kinds of things would the board like to see as far as being addressed and covered in this reentry task force as far as plans that we need to look at? And I know we've got lots of parents out there that have questions about what the plan is, and this is the task force that will ultimately establish that plan.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Mickelson.
Thank you. I certainly would be happy to volunteer. I think it is whatever the group comes up with, if we approach it from the standpoint of accommodating every concern and every belief system, we're going to ask that group to fail. I hope the focus of the group is on putting together plans and practices and responses to things that are focused on serving the educational needs of our students while maintaining the health of our employees and students. And we're just not going to be able to accommodate every individual belief about COVID-19 successfully. And so it is, a very difficult task. There's not consensus in the medical community. Recommendations yesterday are don't do's today. So I think if there's a really clear guidance from the beginning from the board that your job is to come up with what meets the health and safety and educational needs of our students and the health and safety needs of our employees most, that they will see the best success. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Thompson?
if nobody else would object, I wouldn't mind being the other volunteer on that task force.
Okay, so we have Mr. Mickelson and Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Jackman?
I was going to volunteer,
Oh.
but I was also thinking we should probably prioritize having at least one school nurse on the task force who's going to be on the front lines.
They would be. I'm glad that you brought that up, Mr. Jackman. And also, and we've been in contact with our lead nurse with Kim Kessler as we prepared for some of the equipment that's on the addendum for tonight. The other thing too, I think that's really important is that a lot of people wear multiple hats. And so, they come into it as parents, they might be business partners, and that's actually perfect. So they might be representing one group, but we understand that, people wear lots of different hats, and that's perfect for us.
I think too, one thing that we might need to think about is the fact that we have rules that we're functioning under now. That doesn't mean those are the rules that we're going to be functioning under the middle of August, and that we may need to have more than one plan or be flexible with the plan that we do have that can be changed, much like we experienced in March when we had to basically overnight switch gears. So I think that's something, it may not be a single plan as much as it is a flexible plan with several alternatives. But I have to agree with Mr. Mickelson. I think we have to, our highest priority has to be the safety of our students as well as our staff. And I think has to be the top priority is how we can ensure that our students and our staff remain safe, because we are still going to have vulnerable groups as defined in that category on the staff side as well as the student side.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Is that helpful? Are these the things that you're looking for?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Thompson?
I did have one comment. I guess one advantage, if you would consider it that, is we do have other schools that have already gone in different states back to school. So we can see kind of what they've been doing, how they've been handling it with the current recommendations, what their strengths were, what their challenges were, where they failed and how they addressed those issues. I think that would be a good starting point for us, because there are schools that went back and they are implementing those current restrictions. So I think if we would look at that, that would give us a good starting point.
It also seems like the social distancing is not going away. And my concern is our classrooms are not built for the number of students that we have in the classrooms that we have. And schools throughout the state are going to realize that reality. So, obviously there's going to have to be, when it comes to transportation, how do we maintain the social distancing, the lunchroom, social distancing, classrooms, social distancing, and how do we actually have a reasonable number of students in a classroom that's, we've had 27 and 28 students in previously.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Reedy?
Yes, ma'am. And you're right. We're going to be looking at social distancing and things of that nature. However, with the standards change almost not every day so much, but weekly or periodically, the CDC is changing the rules and they're making stipulations about how to have 25 people or less. And they're also, other places have the same problem we have, other states with schools that don't have a whole lot of room, but they have a whole lot of students. And I agree with Ms. Thompson when she says that maybe we need to look at how they're doing things and evaluate it see how it fits for us, because you're right, August, it's going to be different than it is now. And when school goes back in session in August, they may have lifted the 6-foot rule and maybe it'll be okay in the classroom under certain circumstances with certain precautionary measures. And we have to look at all that too, because we really don't have enough staff to break the classrooms in half. And we don't have enough buildings to put them all in if we did. So I agree with Ms. Thompson. We really need to look at other avenues, putting these children all together in the same room, but keep in mind that things are changing, as you have said, constantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none. Superintendent McGovern, does that give you a starting point?
Sure. I appreciate the input and the feedback too. Thank you.
Well, and perhaps an occasional update on what the task force is looking at for the board as well. That would be
Absolutely.
appreciated.
And I think one thing that would be important for the board and for the community is any guidelines that would come from the Wyoming Department of Ed that may be necessary to put in our district reentry plan would also be an important factor that we would need to consider. And then also bringing that plan forward, I believe, to the board to present that final plan, not just updates along the way, but also present that final plan for the board to know and to approve, knowing that and acknowledging that the district really has taken health and safety as number one for everyone, in addition to instruction. I think that would be prudent also.
Well, and I believe the governor's order now goes through the 15th, which is next Monday. So things could change as early as next week in terms of the guidelines the state is putting out. So, that's a continual change as well. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 5. Also for board information, a discussion on the countywide variance order. Superintendent McGovern?
Sure. This agenda item, as we were preparing for tonight's meeting, one of the things Mrs. Jellicoe and I had discussed was for a variance order. Currently, at this time, the district has followed all of the governors and the state health officer, Alexia Harris, all of their orders fully. And so one of the questions that's coming forward for the district is what should we do for the summer for school-sponsored activities and athletics, really that involve our district students. And so what I did was take a look at some of the different pieces of information that were out there and then share that information and then ideally ask this board what the pleasure of this board is. And so as Mrs. Jellicoe mentioned, the current orders are in place through June 15th. And so we could see some changes that would come through this week for that. We know that we've taken a look at the National Federation of what they consider for activities and athletics, and they call that a phased-in approach as well. Some sports are lower risk, some are higher risk. We've looked at the Centers of Disease Control on their recommendations for bringing groups of students back together. They've also provided on their website a flow chart for summer camps and guidelines for that for districts to follow. If the district is interested in doing that, we would ask that the board would consider action perhaps one way or the other. So if they would like the district to pursue a variance to those health orders, which is essentially an exception, and it would need to be approved by our state health officer and our local health officer in writing. I'm sure it would need to outline what students and the coach or sponsors would be doing, what are the health and safety measures, and what are the sanitation and disinfectant that we would be doing in our school facilities as well. Also, one other piece of information that I brought forward for our trustees to consider is also from the district insurance carrier and what was their recommendation to the district. We know that the liability, the risk, the safety, it falls on the district to make sure that we keep our people as safe as we can. For our insurance carrier, they are recommending that it's paramount that the district follow the CDC, meaning the Centers of Disease Control, and the Department of Health guidelines, as well as any directives provided by respective state governors. And that is a quote that I have from our insurance carrier. So really, this item, Mrs. Jellicoe, is to discuss what is the pleasure of this board in moving forward. Would they like the district to pursue a variance for that or remain consistent in following the state health officer, their orders?
Comments from the board?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jackman?
I would suggest staying with the state health orders. I know our community is relatively new, but if you start comparing the CDC and the National Department of Health, they all conflict anyway with what the state is offering. And if we can focus on just one group of health orders, because even a variance, Sweetwater County could probably get one relatively easy with our low number of cases as a whole, but we never know what will happen if we're following the whole state.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mickelson?
I'll defer to Mr. Reedy.
Mr. Reedy?
Thank you, Mr. Mickelson and Madam Chair. I just want to say that if we're looking at something that could possibly jeopardize our insurance, we need to be careful with that because we don't want to tell our folks that we did something out of line of the CDC and it jeopardized our insurance coverage for the whole district. And I encourage and I agree with Mr. Jackman that stick with the CDC and the state regulations on this, just because it's not going to be a good outcome if something happens, and we would all feel terrible if a child got sick or worse. So I say stick with the CDC. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mickelson?
would it be appropriate to, since we're having to meet virtually, to offer a motion for a resolution that the district should, until further guidance is given, follow the directives of the federal, state, and local health direction?
Mr. Mickelson, is that a motion?
If you'll entertain one, yes, it is.
Okay, so it's a motion to create a resolution to follow state, local, and federal guidelines. Am I kind of stating that, paraphrasing that for you?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Madam Chair, I would second that.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Reedy is a second.
That
Okay.
was Mr.
In
Mat-
there.
Mr.
In the
Batolo?
vote.
Yes.
Mr. Batolo is the second. Discussion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Batolo?
I think we're all thinking the same thing as far as safety is concerned. What I don't know is, are we getting any requests from teachers, sponsors, coaches to press any of those guidelines that are there right now? Because I don't think we can afford to do that. But I don't know if we're having any pressure to do that.
Mrs. Jellicoe.
Superintendent McGovern.
Thank you for that question, John. There's a lot of questions that are kind of circulating out there, and from several people, from not just our coaches but our sponsors and parents. Kids want to know, and truthfully, districts are all over the place. Some districts are, and I can see, where they're coming from on it. Some of them are feeling, we need to move forward and get things back to normal. Others are, they want to move in that direction, but health and safety concerns are kind of standing in the way. But we are getting asked a lot of questions about that. And just what would they like to see as far as for Wyoming High School Activities Association, first and foremost, but we're also getting that just on any summer camps for our kids. There's football camps that we're getting asked about. Can they go? Can they attend those? So really the questions are out there from several stakeholder groups.
And my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent McGovern, but the current guidelines stipulate that, say a student is working in a basketball camp or something like that, they have to have access to the basketball that they're using, and no one else, they can't touch anyone else's, and no one else can touch theirs. So, the ability to interact is going to be very limited under the current guidelines. So I think that's something to point out to those that may be listening, as well as the trustees.
Some of the information to take a look at, and I think our Board of Education has mentioned this as well, that things do change, and they can change quickly. Some of the information, school athletics and activities guidance, and as well as other pieces of information. So Centers of Disease Control, they had the 60-page document that came out. They had a flow chart of things for districts to consider. Also some things from, of course, Wyoming High School Activities Association, our insurance carrier, the governor's orders, the state health officer as well. So lots of pieces of information, of course, to consider and bring forward, but also knowing that things can change quickly.
Well, and I think that's the benefit of a resolution that will follow federal, state, and local guidelines. As those guidelines may change, so can our position as far as what's best for our students.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jackman.
do we know if there's any indication of what District 2 is doing? And my thought process is, if we're applying for a county variance, perhaps both districts in the county could work together if that is the will of the board.
Superintendent McGovern.
Sure. I believe Sweetwater 2 has applied for the variance, and I believe they have that variance. So for weight rooms, I'm not quite sure what else is in that, and I don't want to, misspeak for them, but I believe that they have applied for that.
Well, and I think one of the other things of information, and I mentioned this to Superintendent McGovern the other day, was do we have an idea of the cases within Sweetwater 2's population area and ours, And is there a difference there that might impact our desire for a variance?
I don't have that.
Okay, so we don't, that's something to look at. But again, you know, the motion that's on the floor is a resolution to follow federal, state, and local guidelines. Have I
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mickelson, have I misstated anything?
No, that was my motion.
Okay, and we do have a second. And was that
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Reedy that had
Mr. Hay.
Mr. Hay, okay?
yeah, I just want to say that, you know, there's other states that are doing it, like Colorado and Utah, I know are open for some of these camps, but I would like to say that if we find out something from the governor on the 15th, that we can change this, that everyone is notified as quickly as possible.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Any other comments? We're still in the discussion stage.
I think we need to make it clear in the resolution that we're not going to apply for a county variance, and we are going to stick strictly with no variances.
Okay, I will add that. Okay, Mr. Mickelson, are you consider that friendly?
Friendly and redundant. That the resolution to follow the federal, state, and county health recommendations is in and of itself saying we are not seeking a variance because we're going to follow the directions that are given. But I don't know that adding extra is harmful, so I'm open to it.
That's okay with the second as well, Mr. Reedy? Mr. Batolo was the second, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Further discussion? Further discussion? Hearing none, the motion is a resolution to follow federal, state, and local health guidelines. For clarification, we're not applying for the variance. So all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion passes. Does that give you the information that the guidance that you need?
Yes, that would be great to share with people. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Item number 6 is communications and correspondence. If a member of the public initiates specific complaints or charges against an employee, in order to protect the employee's rights to privacy and due process, the board will only hear those complaints or charges in closed session. The board encourages concerned individuals to file complaints using the appropriate district complaint procedure and appropriate forms, which can be obtained from the district's website. We have 2 public comments. The first one is from Jesselyn Sosa, who is a parent. Her comments: so what precautions are we going to take for this coming school year? Are we going to have smaller classrooms and different times at which we attend school or take temperatures at the door? I would suggest that the item that we discussed with the task force probably addresses those concerns as best we can at this time. The second comment comes from Mark Cholak, who is the past SEA president. SEA members were given the opportunity to review and vote on items which were tabled as part of the 2020-2021 negotiations in April. In regard to the issues of prescriptions that were being moved to the pre-approval list and questions about coverage for dental implants, those who participated in the voting approved the changes as presented by the insurance committee and further clarified by Mr. Duncan. So that's the public comment that we have for tonight. Okay. Item number 7 is an executive session for discussion of legal and personnel matters. I would entertain a motion to go into to leave the regular board meeting and go into executive session at this time.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Jackman
So moved.
and second by Mr. Reedy. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we at 7:11, we are going to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of legal and personnel matters. we will return as soon as possible. Okay, I will entertain a motion to return to the regular session.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Jackman. Second,
I'll second.
Mr. Mickelson, that we're back into the regular meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, item number 8, board action. Recommend to approve a state-defined teacher evaluation system for the evaluation of district teachers beginning in the 2020-2021 school year. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I would make that motion.
Okay, motion is made by Mr. Mickelson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hay. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 9, board action. Approval of resolution number 2020-3, Part B, child fine screenings. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make that motion.
Motion is made by Mrs. Thompson. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I would second.
Okay, Mr. Mickelson is the second. Discussion. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Treasurer's report. Mr. Jackman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Give me just a second. All right. For the general fund, we had a beginning balance of $16,106,613.87. We finished with cash of $22,714,614.10. On the school lunch program, we started with $287,447.15. We had deposits of $903.86, which is funny because we didn't have kids buying lunch at schools, but I'm sure something happened. And we finished with $264,796.31. For Head Start, we started with $60,767.69, and we ended with $60,863.11. That concludes the main report.
Thank you, Mr. Jackman. Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Mr. Hay has made a motion to approve the news report. A second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Batolo. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The warrants. Mr. Jackman.
It would be check number 137024 through 137546, totaling $7,166,578.29, along with associated transfers and bank card charges.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Jackman to approve, or by Mr. Mickelson, excuse me, to approve the district warrants. A second?
Second.
Second.
So moved. Second,
By Mr. Reedy, second by Mr. Reedy. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, the consent agenda. All matters listed under consent agenda are matters about which the board has governing policies, implementation of which is delegated to the superintendent. They will be enacted in one motion in the order listed below. There will be no discussion of these items prior to the time the Board of Trustees votes on the motion unless members of the board request specific items to be held and discussed separately and/or removed from this section. Minutes. 12A, approval of the minutes from the May 11th, 2020 board meeting. 12B, approval of the minutes from the May 11th, 2020 executive session. 28th, 2020 special board meeting and public hearing. Finance. 12D, approval of the authorization of the superintendent of schools to sign federal forms.
Hold, please.
Conflict of interest, public investment. 12F, approval to move the regularly scheduled July board meeting to Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. Throughout the district. Personnel. 12H, approval of personnel recommendations. Facilities. 12I, approval and post-approval of the emergency repair of the wiring in the Rock Springs High School press box. 12J, approval of the payment application for Vaughn's Plumbing and Heating Company for the air handling units at Rock Springs High School. General board business. 12K, approval of the Sweetwater County School District Number 1 Recreation Board recommendation for the reappointment of 3 recreation board members. Okay, we have item 12D held. So is there a motion to approve all of the consent agenda with the exception of 12D?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion. All opposed say nay. Motion passes. 12D, approval of the authorization of the superintendent of schools to sign federal forms.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Jackman. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Mickelson is the second. Discussion.
Ms. McGovern, I'm just curious the types of forms or the expectations there. I'm we expect or
No, not a whole lot. A lot of things that come for Head Start really go through their policy council first. I know that you serve as their trustee, as their liaison for Head Start. And truly a lot of the emails and such that we get, they actually go to the chairman. And
been getting a lot of them.
yeah, so there isn't anything that really stands out as out of the ordinary. Usually when I sign, I'm signing on behalf of the district, but if there's something that comes out of routine business, it comes before the board and it's usually out of consent agenda and that the board's aware of the action that I'm taking if it's not routine.
okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor of item 12D, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, let's go to the addendum. The addendum has 2 items on it. The first one is personnel. So is there a motion to approve the personnel items?
So moved.
So moved.
It's been moved by
I'll
Mr.
second.
It's been moved by Mr. Jackman and seconded by Mrs. Thompson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, opposed, nay. Motion passes. The second item on the addendum is for board action, general board business, recommendation to purchase emergency supplies and equipment necessary for the reopening of schools in the fall due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's moved by Mr. Jackman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mickelson. Any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jackman?
just to clarify, all these items are being purchased with CARES Act funding.
So any other discussion?
Mrs. Jellicoe?
Superintendent McGovern?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that I answer Mr. Jackman's question.
Okay.
The funds for this, I think first and foremost, we've talked a lot through the board meeting tonight about the timeliness of supplies and how quickly things could change for us. So it's difficult to put a list together knowing and planning for a future that is very uncertain. And so what you've got in front of you is the best that the district can do at this time, knowing that we need to be ready for different phases of what the fall may look like. The funding source for the items that are listed on the addendum, we have not received any federal CARES money at this time. So what the district is doing for this is it will come from our capital projects fund. It could be from our district general fund, other funds that the district has, the federal relief funds, that is the CARES Act, pending what those guidelines allow. Although at this time we haven't received that. And luckily the district has the capital projects fund and some of those other funds that can really help us with this. The danger of waiting to order is the supply of whether we would be able to receive the items. The negative of ordering now is we're just planning for uncertainty, but those funding sources at this time are not from the federal CARES because we have not received anything at this point.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other discussion? I do think it's important to say that, you know, we're anticipating needing these, obviously. I think that goes without saying that we need to be prepared. These are not things that we can order at the last minute and expect to have them by August 15th. So for those people who have sought to put this list together and contemplate what we're going to need in a couple of months, thank you very much. And I think we're going to be happy if we get this stuff in time for August 15th. Even ordering now, we'll be happy to have this stuff by the time that we anticipate needing it. So thank you for the work on this. Okay, further discussion. Okay, there is a motion then to
Madam Chair.
Mr. Reedy.
Yes, I just want to say that I think they've done a very good job thus far, but we need to keep in mind that there may be another session when it comes up that they need to order different supplies or something added to that list. So we probably all, with what's going on and what's coming in the future, we don't know about at this point. So just bear in mind, folks, that's probably going to change and some things are probably going to be added to that list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mickelson?
the only thing I would add is that I know the Department of Education is working on getting CARES Act funding for PPE for school districts. So if we were at some point to get it, then we could recapture that money and put it back in our capital account, which would be great. The reality is the best time to order all this PPE equipment would have been a year ago, right? And the supply chain for the PPE, especially for the masks, is really struggling right now. The manufacturer, the cloth that is used to make the masks cannot make enough cloth. So mask manufacturers can't make enough masks. And so the quicker we can get this ordered, the better off we'll be. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none then, all in favor of the recommendation to purchase the emergency supplies and equipment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, item number 13, transportation, board information, the school bus routes for the 2020-2021 school year. Mrs. Bolton?
Sorry, Chair Jellicoe, Superintendent McGovern, and members of the board. Per the Chapter 20 rules, the way the crow flies is how they measure it. It's 1 mile, anything 1 mile or greater for elementary. So for us, that would be K6. We can have a bus route for. Or if there is a safety issue, such as having to cross railroad tracks, no sidewalks, having to cross a multi-lane street, things like that. For secondary, it increased to 2 miles. So that would be our 712. Rochelle Knezovich did a phenomenal job. These are actually our original bus routes that we've had. And the elementary, at first, we thought that they had they were looking at upping the mileage to 1.5, but they ended up not. And so prior to us realizing that they had not changed it, all of the yellow highlighted elementary routes were routes that fell under the rules, but they don't any longer. If there are any that fall less than 1 mile, they actually fall under the Chapter 20 safety rules. So actually the K6, all of those are justified now. However, secondary, there will be changes potentially. We left all the routes on there. And like I said, they measure it as the crow flies, which I don't, they go by the fastest route.
It just says as deemed necessary by the district. So no more crow flies.
For the mileage, I'm told.
For Chapter 20, they didn't even put that in.
Okay.
So
So
crow's not
That's
flying.
beneficial.
Yeah.
that's even better
Yeah.
because we know kids don't walk that way, right?
Yeah, right.
So all of the routes on here, the blue fall under, if they're highlighted yellow, they fall under the 2 miles, but they fall within the listed safety things in Chapter 20. If they're listed in the blue, there's safety concerns, whether there's lack of sidewalks, having to potentially go on the belt loop because we know what way the kids are going to take walking.
And those were some of the exceptions that we made last year. So we have continued those because there's been no improvement to whatever the safety issue was.
Correct.
Then.
So
it's
those
still
will continue.
It's still a safety issue then.
Yes.
Okay, so
So that was the initial thought behind the separate highlighting, but yeah, these have all been previously approved with deemed
Okay.
safety issues.
Okay.
And we are not looking at proposing to eliminate any of the bus routes that were initially or have been established.
Okay, and this is for board information only at this time.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions, trustees? And if my memory serves me right, there is no cap to transportation. Is there?
No.
They removed the cap. Okay.
Just
Even though we are reimbursed a year later, but the cap has been removed. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, item number 14, general board business, approval of policy JECBA, foreign exchange students, and 14B, approval of policy IICAB, transportation for student activities / out of town routes. Is there a motion to approve those two policies?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Jackman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hay. Any discussion? I will just point out that item 14B, the reason that one was revised had to do with transporting students, many of them with the activities due to black ice, the classification of black ice. And once we found out that the state basically puts black ice on every road advisory in the wintertime, our students were not able to travel. So that's why that policy was revised. And we believe now that it will be easier to get our students out for their activities and athletics and so forth on safe roads. They're still safe, but the black ice is not going to be the issue that it was this past year. So we have a motion and a second to approve these two policies. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 15, board action. 15A, recommendation for approval of addendum number 1 to the 2020-2021 negotiated agreement. And I read Mark Cholak's comments regarding the vote of SEA. They did approve it as well. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Madam Chair.
It's been moved by Mr. Mickelson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Thompson. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion passes. Item number 16 for your information are the graduation dates for 2021. Item number 17, board information. 17A, the alternative calendar 4-day school week update. Mrs. Bolton.
Good evening, Chair Jellicoe, Superintendent McGovern. I feel like I've said that a lot. Members of the board. I'm working on the needs assessment, and then I will send that off to be worked from the professional side. Otherwise, there's no update.
Okay, thank you.
That was so easy.
Okay, item number 18, good of the order.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Batolo?
I just wanted to share some positive feedback that I received from several sets of parents and students about all the hard work that Rock Springs High School did and the district did to make graduation something that was memorable. They appreciated especially the opportunity to take pictures and wondered if in succeeding years if we might be able to leave that stage up there so they can do that again. The only thing that I heard from them that they thought was something that could be better would be a loop of pomp and circumstance, and that was done with a smile. So thank you for everybody that did that. That was awesome. I went down there myself, and I thought it was a really good solution for a tough situation.
Any other good of the order? I spent last Thursday and Friday in a virtual meeting with the Joint Education Committee. They had they spent the first day Thursday referring to their K-12 education program. So there was much conversation about Superintendent Balo's request to update the basket of goods. And they focused an awful lot on competency-based essential learnings rather than so much seat time, particularly with the situation we found ourselves in with COVID, because they think that there may be some opportunities where some students may want to continue with virtual learning. Certainly some with vulnerable health issues, and some students that just seem to maybe learn better that way. So there was much discussion about that. They had a discussion about the update on computer science standards. So a lot of it was just in preparation for the interim committees that are coming forth. So it was interesting to listen to the comments. The task force on recalibration will meet June 24th and 25th, and it has not yet been decided whether that's going to be a virtual or in-person meeting, but that is the next one that will be on the agenda. Any other good of the order? Okay, item number 19, new business. 19A is the vacancy notice as of June 2nd, 2020. And I'm very happy to see us down well below the 49 that we were last year at this time. And so hopefully we will have a full complement of staff as we move forward.
They have a COVID exception.
Right now going on for teaching license, which has kind of opened up the door, helping us out a little bit.
Good. 19B, the calendar for the months of June, July, August, and September 2020. 19C, May 2020 Head Start Liaison Report. Any other comments from the trustees? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Jackman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Reedy. We are
Second.
adjourned at 8:08.